Hello, class. And all right, we're going to linger a little bit longer in book one before we move on to book two. But I hope we'll finish it in the next 15 minutes. Um, Happiness in chapter seven of book one, Aristotle gives the uh, two necessary um, aspects of the highest good and claims that only happiness meets both of these requirements. The highest good must be complete and self-sufficient, and only happiness is complete and self-sufficient in the relevant sense that it can be it is the highest good for human life, um, human flourishing or happiness. So happiness is complete. By saying that it's complete, he just means that when you've got it, you don't need, um, let's see, sorry. Another translation doesn't say complete, it says final. And I think that might be a better way of getting at it. It needs to be final and self-sufficient. Final in the sense that when you've got it, you're done. So complete in that sense. When you've got it, you're done. You don't need it as a means to something else. You use it as it's something you seek for its own sake and not for the sake of anything else. It's complete unto itself. The best contrast case here would be money or wealth. Is never complete. You're never finished, right? You always want it for something else, and you always want more. Whereas happiness, as human eudaimonia, is complete because when you've got it, you're done. Yeah? In other words, you don't want it as a means to something else. You seek it for its own sake and not for the sake of anything else. Also, it's self-sufficient. And self-sufficient is just to say that having this thing makes life worth living. Or as he uses the word choice-worthy in our text, it makes life worthy of choice. It makes life worth living to have this thing. Again, I think money fails there. While it might make life go better, and as we'll see, as an external good, wealth is going to be, some measure of wealth is going to be, for Aristotle, necessary for eudaimonia, necessary for happiness, as what he calls an external good. If we're broke, we're not going to be able to flourish, for Aristotle. But wealth in itself is not self-sufficient. It doesn't make life worth living. And of course, it's neither is it complete. Only happiness, understood in the very special way Aristotle understands it, makes life worth living or choice-worthy. And happiness is also complete or final. All right. More about the function of a human being. So chapter 7 is important because it includes the very famous function argument. I've already kind of hit on this once earlier when I used the example of my friend the guitarist, my buddy who used to play the guitar, who I guess he still does, but who used to not play the guitar when we were in high school, and he practiced and got better at it, and it was hard. You had to develop habits and so forth, and then later it felt good. That's definitely at work here. But Aristotle's using the flute player or the lyre player as a different analogy here. He's talking about the function of someone who plays the flute, or we can talk about the guitar here, right? There's a function of someone who plays the guitar, and you can tell whether or not someone is a good guitarist based on whether or not they play the guitar well. If you know what the function of guitar playing is, then you can tell if somebody does it well or poorly. So my buddy, we were in high school, and he gets this like Fender Stratocaster, and I go to his house after school, right, and we're hanging out and this, and he's like hanging out, he's sitting in his bed, and he's like got the guitar sitting in his lap, and he's like playing it like a zither, and he's got like a book of guitar chords with little pictures of the fretboard and where to put your hand because he doesn't read music. And he's like putting his hand here and he's like strumming it, really like a zither, right? On his lap. And he's strumming it about 6 times. And he's like, Phil, you know what song it is, right? And I was like, hell no, I have no idea what you're playing because you suck at it, right? I mean, he was a poor guitar player. And I knew that he sucked at it because I know what it was supposed to sound like, right? I know the function of playing guitar, and so I could tell whether he was doing it well or poorly. So for Aristotle, our life is like that. We can do the human thing, the characteristic activity or the function of a human being just insofar as they are a human being. We can perform that function well or poorly. And if we do it well, then we're going to flourish and achieve eudaimonia because it's the human thing. It's our thing for the kind of thing that we are in nature. And if we do that well, then it's going to be, we're going to be rocking it, right? We're going to be achieving our highest end or supreme good, as Aristotle has it, the chief good of our life as a human being. So it's important to know what the function is because then we can tell whether or not we're doing it well. I've already told you at one point what the function is. The function is reason, right? Human beings are between beasts and the gods, right? We have use of reason. Makes us a little bit divine. It also makes us, but we also have bodies, and we also have to have. We have both the moral virtues, as we'll see in a moment, as well as the intellectual virtues. And reason is operation. It has to be operating on both levels because reason is our thing. Yeah. So intellectually, it's easy to see how reason works. With the intellectual virtues like wisdom, we're kind of just, we're only as, that's like, we're born where some people are smarter than others. There's nothing you can really do about that, but you can work at it. You can study, you can go to college and improve it. There's certain limitations, right? Moral virtue is different, though. Moral virtues admit of a mean, and we strive at it in different ways. But it's still important to point out that reason operates also at the moral level because it's our rational nature which determines what the right thing to do is. He actually has a special term for that. He calls it practical reason, or phronesis in Greek. We use practical reason in our moral life, and we use sort of more pure reason in our intellectual life. They're both important, and although Aristotle believes that the intellectual life is higher, is a more pure exercise of our rational nature, it is nonetheless important to have practical reason activated in our moral life. All right. So the life of nutrition and growth, this is his basic argument. It's not the best argument in the world, but we're going to go with it, right, for now. He says, well, there's all living things. So there's plants, there's non-human animals, and then there's animals. And the man who invented the idea of zoological taxonomy says, well, how do we, what is the specific difference? What is it that separates us off from the rest of the branching tree of living things that makes us different from other things, right? Well, is it the life of nutrition and growth? No, because we share that with non-human animals as well as plants, right? Well, is the life of sensation? No, because while we don't share the life of sensation with plants, we do share it with the beasts, right? We do share it with animals, non-human animals. Well, is it the life of reason? Bingo. Reason is our specific difference, according to Aristotle. It's what makes us different from all other living things. And so when we are using reason, or when reason is operating in our life, according to Aristotle, we are doing the thing that we are supposed to be doing for the kind of thing that we are. We're thinking. When we use that in our moral life to determine how to live, then we're doing the human thing well, and it's going to allow us to flourish. doing the human thing well. Well, now we know what the function of a human being is. It's rational activity. Boom. Right? Again, in the moral life, that means using practical reason. That is, reason aimed at determining what the right thing to do is. As we'll see, it's going to involve the virtues. The human good is activity of soul in accordance with virtue. So the human good, that is eudaimonia, or happiness, is an activity of soul. And the soul is the animating principle of all living things for Aristotle. Plants have souls for Aristotle. Dogs and cats have souls for Aristotle. All living things that have, for him, this very mysterious, internal mechanism for locomotion. We move about of our own accord. Same with plants, sort of, right? From his, 4th century BC perspective. And that was kind of mysterious. It must be a soul, right? So the soul is just the living principle of all living things. And it's also, for human beings, it's also the mind. So mind and soul are kind of the same term for Aristotle. It's the thinking part and it's the living part. The part that moves, gets you up and gets you going in the morning. It's also the part that does math. Right? So the human good turns out to be activity of soul in accordance with virtue. Virtue here is a crucial term. The Greek is arete, and I want you to know that Greek term, arete. And I have a slide on it later. You can write it down then. But virtue is exactly the same word as excellent. You'll notice in the reading, Aristotle talks about the virtue of the eye. What does that even mean? We think of virtue as like virtues of character only, but in Greek, it just means excellence. And that means the excellence of the eye is to see well. An excellent eye is an eye that is 20/20 vision, right? An excellent driver is a driver who drives well. An excellent guitarist is one who plays the guitar well, right? So an excellent human is one who is virtuous in her or his moral life, who is an excellent human being, who does the human thing excellently. And they're going to flourish. That's what we're trying to do. And we do that by practicing virtue. All right. The moral virtues. This eudaimonia thing takes our whole life. You can't stop practicing. You've got to keep developing those habits of human excellence, human moral excellence throughout your life, according to Aristotle. It takes our whole life. For as one swallow does not make a summer, nor one day, neither does one day nor short time make someone blessed or happy. Okay. Not something we can stop doing. It's not like the Buddhist concept of nirvana, although there are a lot of parallels with Buddhist thought and virtue ethics. In fact, it might even be read by some scholars as a form of virtue ethics. But unlike the Buddhist concept of nirvana or nibbana, Aristotelian eudaimonia is not something that you achieve once for all and then, boom, can be finished. You can lose it if you don't keep the pressure on. Being an excellent human being is something you have to get up and do every day. You're not done until you're dead. Also different from Plato, who saw injustice or lack of virtue as really kind of a failure of knowledge. And once you knew the good, which for Aristotle was the true good, transcendent to this world, then it would transform you so that you would be good. And it was kind of more like nirvana or a state that you couldn't lose once you achieved it. But for Aristotle, no way. There's no giving up. All right. Chapter 8, briefly. I may not have assigned Chapter 8 to you, but I want to point this slide out, might pause it and read it. Um, I just think it's interesting. Again, I've already talked about the role of pleasure. It comes, like for the guitarist, after the calluses. It comes later. It's not there in the beginning. No one would call a person just or good if he didn't enjoy doing it. If he didn't enjoy being a good and just person, they wouldn't be good. So you don't have the virtues, frankly, if it don't feel good, right? You've got to work at it. When you've worked at it, it should feel good. More with chapter 8. There are certain things, calls them external goods, that if you don't have it, it will destroy your felicity. That is, your happiness, your pleasure. Because on some level, happiness is still kind of, I mean, it's not like eudaimonia is completely unrelated to our everyday notion of happiness as a kind of feeling of, gleeful cheerfulness, It is related to that. And for that reason, although that doesn't exhaust the concept of eudaimonia, for that reason, if you have certain, problems in your life, you're going to lose it. You can't be happy. You can't flourish as a human being if you don't have high birth, noble children, personal beauty. Yes, because if you're terribly ugly, of low birth, or solitary, or childless, then you're not going to be happy. That's not really the sort of person for Aristotle to be happy. Now you may quibble a little bit about the specific external goods that Aristotle chooses here, but the idea that there aren't some kind of external goods that if you lack them is going to spoil your happiness seems to be a pretty sound idea. I don't know about the low birth thing here, but if you're completely broke, and you're always worried about money and you're living paycheck to paycheck, Aristotle doesn't think you can really count as flourishing, right? You're going to be too preoccupied with the struggle of everyday life. Also, solitary. If you don't have friends, Aristotle has a whole chapter in the Nicomachean Ethics, and I sometimes teach it, on friendship. If you don't have good friends, you're probably not going to be happy. And by good friends, he means morally good friends, right? Not just, people you want to chill with, but actually good human beings in your life looking out for you and for whom you look out, right? Similarly, if you don't have children, the Greeks put a lot of stock in having children and having good children. And again, good here, not just in, oh, they're a good child, la la, they're successful. You hear people, bragging about their kids, they're in college, they're studying well, and they're going to be this and that when they get out of college, and they're going to have a big house and get rich and la la la. Aristotle thinks that while that is important for him, he thinks it really ruin your life if your children were bad people, if they didn't exhibit the virtues in their life, that it would spoil yours. As a father of 2 small children, I'm inclined to think that he's right on that score. It would ruin my life if my children were bad human beings, if they weren't generous, if they weren't, as we'll see, if they weren't courageous and generous and honest, if they were bad people, if they were thieves or they were liars, if they cheated to get their wealth, I think it would ruin my happiness. Anyway, as with all philosophy classes, there's a lot for you to think about. This is the last part. It's book 1, chapter 10 here that we're going to talk about. I love this quote here. We all are thrown into this world in so many different ways, and there's so much that isn't up to us, who our parents were, how much money we were raised with, where we live, where we went to school, the language we speak, and so on and so on. We don't have a whole lot of control over a lot of external aspects of our life. And we might get thrown, no matter how hard we try. We might get thrown we might get thrown in our lives a set of circumstances that were outside of our control, no matter how good we try to live. But Aristotle points out that the person who is living the eudaimonic life, if they're struck with misfortune, they're able to bear up under it with dignity. And they, as he says, will never be completely wretched if they were virtuous when misfortune struck. And also, if we don't have everything that we really need, the virtuous person is going to make the best out of the fortunes of life with dignity, right? That a shoemaker, just as a shoemaker makes the noblest shoe out of the leather that he is given, the virtuous soul makes the best life out of the circumstances that they've been given. So we've got to make the best shoes out of the leather that we've been given. Not everybody is going to have the same fortune in life. The happy person is the one who, adequately furnished with external goods, engages in activities in accordance with complete virtue, not just for any period of time, but over a complete life. That is the definition of eudaimonia, the eudaimonic life, doing well the human thing. And it's the point of things. The next set of slides I have are for book 2, and we're going to talk about the virtues and the moral life in more detail.